Hello, Facebook. This is Talk Sex With Me Tuesday, and this is our second edition on sexual values. I missed last week because I was cold. I had a cold. I got cold too, but I had a cold more specifically. So anyway, today we're going to continue talking about sexual values. The last time I spoke, I talked about what are sexual values, how can you identify them, so forth and so on. Today we're going to talk about the difference between core sexual values and conflicted or confused sexual values. So a core sexual value for most of us is a value that we feel pretty strongly about. So this is something that typically is a topic for debate. This may be something that you kind of avoid sharing with many people because it's very private and sacred to you. So an example of this might be abortion, or your thoughts or feelings on abortion. An example of this might be your thoughts or feelings pertaining to homosexuality or transgender. That's typically where we see a lot of core values come into play, whether or not sex should wait for marriage, whether or not you use contraception. So most people don't really struggle with trying to identify what their core values are because they have some pretty strong emotions associated with them. Where we struggle is when we have either conflicted or confused sexual values. So conflicted are, you might have mixed feelings or mixed opinions. So you might not support abortion, but you can concede that there's a time for it. In the example, if a woman's life is in danger, or if the baby or fetus rather was conceived out of rape or incest, then you might think to yourself, well, I could see why someone would want an abortion in that situation, and you feel differently about it. That's a situation where you might have what I call a conflicted sexual value. Another instance is a confused sexual value. And this is a situation where typically you just don't have enough information. So you might have a little bit, but not enough to make an informed decision. And this could really be about anything from sexual orientation, gender orientation, whether or not children are sexual beings when they start to display their sexuality. Is it okay for teens to be sexual? You might, again, you can be confused on any number of topics, and this is just usually a research and education-based issue. So as we continue to go through this series on sexual values, it's important to distinguish not just what sexual values are, but how to know the difference between what your core sexual values are, because those aren't really amenable to change, at least not very easily, and to differentiate that from what your conflicted or your confused sexual values are. So now that we have kind of talked about the difference between those two, my challenge is to you, to those of you who are going to listen to this, is when you identify a core sexual value, ask yourself, where does this come from? Why is this important or relevant to me? Is this something that I was taught by my parents, by my church? Is this something that I feel like I've learned through life experience? Ask yourself why. We'll deal with the what to do with the why later, but for now I just want you to ask yourself why. Really critically examine where your values are coming from. Same thing with your conflicted or your confused values. Why? Why are you conflicted? Or typically conflicted means you have multiple values that are not coinciding with one another, and so that's where the conflict arises. Or if you're confused, then I would challenge you to go do some research on this topic so that you have enough information to make an informed opinion. So next time when we come back together, we're going to talk about not just where do these values come from, but why is it important to know where they come from, and what do you want to pass on to your children now that you understand what your sexual values are? Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you guys next time.